Also, we're so hard on these designers for not being creative enough, but it's really above them. It's the industry itself. They are really just doing what they asked to do. I agree and then disagree at the same time. So I definitely agree with the overall sentiment that the issue is as a wider issue with the industry and where it's going. However, I do think that everything is a choice, right? Like at CSM, in your graduate collection, you have to do a minimum number of looks. You don't have to do a footwear collection. You don't have to do certain accessories, but there are still designers that will make a fragrance and will make a footwear collection and will do all that extra shit, even though that's not actually part of what they are initially graded on, and they don't need to do that. They do that because that's their conviction and they're trying to tell a full story, and the full story can't be told unless they do the footwear, so they'll do the extra work. That's the kind of designer that Galliano is. He's like, I'm trying to tell the full story, so this has to come with this, and this has to come with this, and the set has to be like this, and the models have to do this, and the gestures have to be like this. That to me is the sign of like a top creative. I think doing the bare minimum, yes, you can get away with it, but I think that, it's an excuse, because not every designer does that. Everywhere Galliano he's been this same way, right? The designers that everywhere they go, they still add a very high level of creativity. I think Janison is the same way. So I agree that it is a symptom of the industry, but I also think that designers can do more than just the bare minimum and just create like a ultra commercial, no emotion, no ideas, no creativity collection and just churn it out. It's just a choice. Everything to me is a choice. I don't like to give designers that much credit. I mean, designers are sometimes harshly critiqued a bit too far, but in this case, I think that we're not just going to give them credit for just, making a collection, because at the end of the day, they're designers.
Okay, I really want to speak about this. I guess there's two separate lots in here, because when I heard designers, we were talking about like possibly students as well as, but maybe we're just talking about like premier designers, right? And I sincerely believe that we aren't hard on designers at all in general, not for real. We critique their collections, but we don't actually push the needle when it comes to necessarily buying or not buying, because we're not their consumer base, for instance. And if their consumer base is reacting to what they're creating, then they are adding value, and positively or negatively, right? But I guess in terms of like when it comes to the student side, it's like what you need is ingenuity, because I can't speak for the all of this premiere and all of, because sometimes, or should I say,
Quick question, because the thing about designers adding value though is that, are they? Because if you look at the financials of most brands, what's selling is not what the designers design. So when Virginie Viard was selling, billions at Chanel, what was selling was the perfumes that she didn't make and the bag designs that existed before her and she didn't make. So, you know what I mean? Are they adding value, or is that just a symptom of just the commercial, machine of the brands that they work at?
All right. So premier designers, right? So that's why I said positively or negatively, because they can look at us, and my question would be how much do we actually push the needle in critiquing a Virginie Viard collection negatively? And I would say not much, but there is like an overwhelming resounding sound that, let's say, if several of us agree, then the fashion public looks at that, or should I say the people that buy into these things look at that and they say, oh, people that are really into fashion don't really like this collection, then maybe we shouldn't buy it. That's really the only way that us speaking about it negatively or critiquing it can push the needle. However, when it comes to premier designers, it's very hard for me to say that we're hard on them, and then it would be difficult for me to say that they're not adding value, because the value can be added negatively or positively. It just depends on how we perceive it. So they can be continuing doing their job, and like you were saying, like let's put it in the student example, right? You're being graded on this and this, and they're being graded on what is selling, what are you creating, are you making the things that we want to see on the runway as a business, right? So that we can shop this to our clientele, so that they can keep buying these bags or keep buying these jackets or keep buying these perfumes or fragrances. And if they're ticking off what the hard work that they're supposed to be putting in is, then I guess they're adding value to somebody, or else they would be fired, because we've seen people get fired for not doing the bare minimum, for instance. So
yeah, that's crazy. I mean, the interesting thing though is that it can be very interesting to see like what the direct value is, because like I said, there are some brands that what is selling has absolutely nothing to do with what the designer is creating. Like let's say Chanel, we've seen that recently, like it's the flat bags and the fragrances that are selling. But then you have other brands like, let's say Alaya, for example. What is trending right now are the Alaya ballet, mesh shoes. That was literally created by Pietro Muglia. So you can literally say that, the sales increase is as a direct result of what the designer is doing. So I think for different designers and different brands, it's different degrees of impact to me. Because I think some brands, it doesn't matter who designs there. You could have a mushroom designing there. The Chanel fragrances and flat bags are still going to sell.
Yeah, and this is the thing, right? Like, and just to talk on the young designer side, it's like I speak to designers pretty much every day, right? And I just got off the phone to a couple, and yo, man out here are just grafting. Like, everyone is grafting, and it's the end of the year, it's Christmas, but yo, I know designers that work year round just trying to get in, making money how they can, right? And then so that they can create collections, and everyone is locked in. But one of the main things is like you're not gonna be able to look at Galliano or look at Bill Anderson or look at Bottega and say, yo, I want to do fragrances and a watch and I want to build this whole world when you've got like £3,000 to work with. You're gonna need to go down to brass tacks and say, yo, what are the things that I want to grade myself on, and then roll that over to the next collection, because you're creating a business at the end of the day, and you're adding what the type of value you're adding is to a small circle of people that are intrigued in your particular process. And this doesn't really go down to fashion designers. This is like creative industry in general, right? And it's like this live stream is important, right, in terms of how you run your business. And then for me, painting is important, and making videos for my painters is important, right? So what is really running your small circle, so that you can get to the idea of building a world and being able to do all of these things. But we can't be looking at the premier people and saying, yo, I want to do that now, when John Galliano is literally 3 times some of our ages. So it's like, where are we actually looking? Which is why it's so
yeah, facts. But I will say, and this is why I don't give designers, like I said, credit. Like, I don't want to give them credit, because and I know that, because I graduated from CSM literally last year. I saw collections from kids that didn't have £10 in their bank account that was so good. I was like, yeah, from now on, there's no excuse if you work at a luxury brand, because like the stuff I was seeing from some of the students that I went to school with, I'm like, how? And they'll be like, I met this person in this shop and they kind of just liked my idea, so they gave me a free roll of fabric, and then I went to this place and I managed to get thread, and I went to this place and I managed to get this, and then you see the end result and you're like, what?
What? That's what I'm talking about.
Which is why I do not give these designers credit. That's why sometimes like people say, oh, you're like big designers who are at the biggest, the premier designers.
I was like, fam, the younger ones are killing it out here, bro.
I'm talking about the premier designers. So that's why I don't give them excuses, and that's why sometimes on these live streams it can come across like I'm being harsh, because most of the industry is like, oh my god, but did you see that bag though? Like, know that documentary that Jeremy Newson made, where there was that journalist that said, remember, there's always something to like.
I think you did Patreon on that.
Even if it's a sock. Yeah. So it's very much one of those things where a lot of the industry is like that, and that's why kind of what you were saying, where you said, or you feel like designers, we don't critique designers harshly enough or whatever.
I don't think we do.
That's mainly it. I think if you compare fashion to any other medium, like creative medium, we are definitely the most lax, because the way, let's say, people are critiqued by music journalists or music media, or the way people are critiqued in the art world is harsh compared to
the art world is definitely the bottom. Like, but that's the thing, right? In terms of value added, I do believe that fashion media does critique it more than it would, let's say, the art industry. I do believe the music industry, though, critiques the music artists way harsher, in terms of like, and not harsh, but like, if someone isn't good, you're really prepared to say that this person isn't good. Why do they have $1 million deal, for instance? Because their deals are public. Whereas with these designers, we don't know how much they're making. Like, we can infer, like, what I'm saying? Like, there's this new saying that people always say, is like, I won't tell you when I make $1 million, but there will be signs. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, we don't know how much they're making per se, but we can infer that they're making a lot. And then based on the financials of these public companies, we should be able to say, okay, this company makes 500 million or $1 billion. And then when this designer got there, they're at 3. But what is this designer actually creating, and what are they actually adding? Is it just the business side that's doing really well, or is it the designer that's actually adding the value? Like you said with Peter Mulier, right? It's like he added value straight away. But that the same can't be said for many of these that are at premier brands, or should I say the biggest luxury brands in the world. And we're not seeing much. Like they're not pushing the needle there. But you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, because I mean, it's not critiquing to be mean. It's critiquing to help people improve. What I mean by that is like, even when I was in school, it was more of like, when you critique work, you have to consider, and this is something that I think most people don't do, maybe because it's like something you learn when you study fashion journalism formally, but like it's this idea of, you're not just reviewing the work itself, like just because a designer says I'm inspired by this and this, that's one stage, but then the next stage is to then go and read those books and to see that art and see if what they are doing actually makes sense. Just because they say, you know, I was inspired by brutalism, if all they are doing is, you know, a white shirt and they're calling that brutalism, then it's a terrible interpretation of what that is, and it's not really that interesting of an interpretation. Also, that's the next level of, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that's another thing where you're helping designers, you're critiquing them to help them improve, because at that point you're then saying that there's not much validity to saying that this is an interpretation of brutalism when it's just a white t-shirt. You know what I mean? There's no texture to the fabric, there's nothing interesting other than it's just a color, and you've kind of tried to take something that's basic and simple and you've tried to add value to it after by mentioning something like brutalism to try and give something that doesn't have meaning. And that's something that I try to do sometimes. So it's not really just about what designers say. It's like, okay, cool, you said that, but in the context of what you're trying to do, how does that make sense?
And that is where because this is a funny thing, right? That's where I critique these new designers in like today. It's like you are making something and then trying to create the story. So, and there's a lot of people that just haven't lived enough life yet to tell a beautiful story. And then there was a question I always asked with my friends, like when we would just be in cafes and things of that nature, right? I would just ask them, does what we're saying need to exist? And like that's a deep personal philosophical question, right? But it's like we grew up in the world of content where everything is being pushed out constantly. Okay, in the sea of content, is this adding to the map, or is this like a beautiful pearl that people can discover once it's being created? And if you can't answer that question honestly, then you know you're not really actually creating in the artist way that you say that you want to create. And there's a lot of guys out here, guys being gender neutral, right? A lot of guys out here that are creating and they are only trying to add substance afterwards, and it's like trying to put like honey on a turd. Like people, you can't make the rubbish sweet. You have to make it good thing, and then you know put the honey on it so that people can be attracted to it because you have great storytelling. And I don't want to go on a rant, but I can. But yeah,
Go for it.
no.
That's why I love the streams. It's a medium where you can talk and just keep talking. You don't have to.
Yeah,
it doesn't end after 10 minutes.
Yeah, it's like, okay, we grew up in the sustainability era, right? I remember when people were making all of these things and saying it's sustainable, and it's like
Headache.
vegan this, sustainable that, and then you know, and then that was when, and I love the era when me and you were just like looking on like the product details of like these clothes, and it's like, wait, that's plastic, and then we look up polyamide, like, wait, you're saying this is vegan leather, but it's plastic, and it's like, so wait, which is worse, the leather or the plastic? And then we started having this discussion, and then it continues, and now we call it green.
Plastic is way worse than like leather that is derived from the waste product of the meat industry.
Bro. And then it's like, oh, this fashion week is fur free or it's animal product free, but in reality I'm looking at the fur on the runway and that is where it can only exist, or I'm looking at the leather on the runway because that's where it can only exist, because that isn't going to be in someone's closet archive and someone call it vintage 30 years from now, because the plastic will crumble in the person's hand once it's been bought. And the shoulder, you know, like when you have a rubbish leather jacket and it's just like chipping at the shoulders because it's been worn and all of these other things. Yeah. We aren't existing in a time and a place where you can say something is sustainable when the reality is a good sustainable material lasts for decades.
Exactly.
And that's for me, when we were going through that was just like a characteristic characterization of the times we were in, and in saying like, listen, you're making this today, but will it live tomorrow? And if it can't, then in quotes, that's unsustainable.
Literally nothing sustainable about it by definition. But people get too used to ticking boxes. It's like, and that is the same mentality of someone, the kind of person that designs a t-shirt and adds meaning to it after is the same type of person that would design a plastic thing and call it vegan leather and say it's sustainable. It's the same person.
Yeah, and that is like today, like there's not one designer in my like Rolodex that can come to me with that type of BS and think I'm gonna stand for it. Like they literally do not exist where I'm at. And it's like they know like, oh, I can't bring Damilare just anything. Like once the idea is like that is the kind of like value that needs to be added to, you know, our small circles, because yeah, we are creating for these little worlds, but at the same time it's like 10 years down the line, are me and you gonna look at this and say, oh yeah, that was hard? Like, and if we're not gonna do that, then why are we even trying right now? We're literally breaking sweat. We're using our P's from our day job to make these creative like items, and then this isn't even gonna last 5 years for us to look at it. No, man, like we need to like relax with all of that type of stuff and actually create the things that really matter to us today. Are we really living in the context of our time or just the moment? And those are two completely different things. I know they sound the same, but like if we're not living in the context of our times, if we can't create value to our communities, we're just living in the moment because that is what's popping and that is what our people want to see on live, or that's what people want to see, you know, on TikTok. Like we ain't making for TikTok over here, fam. TikTok is not going to be around 30 years from now, and we're not going to scroll all the way down to the bottom of our feeds to our grandchildren and be like, yo, this is what I made. It got in 2020. No,
TikTok is literally going to be outlawed in the US very soon.
Yeah, it's like, let's relax, let's chill. If we don't have a good idea yet, let's cook. You know what I'm saying, fam? Let the stew, like, you know what I'm saying? Let the stew slowly, because you know when your mum is like, yo, don't touch the stew yet, man. It's not ready. You can't eat your rice yet now. No, the meat still needs to, like, slowly, fam. You can't eat yet. You can't eat yet. This needs to cook properly. Do you want to be eating hard oxtail, or do you want to be eating super sweet and succulent oxtail, fam? Think about it. When you understand what I'm saying, you understand life, fam.
Yeah. And Luke is also, I appreciate a designer like Phoebe Fowler who will say it's just a jacket. Yeah, I do too. Because what happens is that the pseudo fake intellectual designers try it, and then I'll critique it, and then people say I mean or I don't understand someone's work. But it's like, not only do I understand it, I actually read the book that they said they referenced, and there's still nothing there, even after going through that process. Okay, Luke says, meanwhile, her fans intellectualize everything she does. Yeah, that is something I see on social media too. People like to over-intellectualize designers that they love the most. It's kind of strange. It's really, really strange. People can't take themselves out of the fact that you love this designer, but that one thing that they did wasn't actually that great. People struggle to do that sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes we create because we just wanted to see the thing exist. We just wanted to know we could do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, that's cool. Like, you made something fun for yourself, isn't it? So yeah, man, we should always have fun with what we create. But obviously, people around us will intellectualize things, and it's I don't know whether it's a bad thing to intellectualize something. However, it is a bad thing to say, oh, you just don't understand, when the person themselves said, listen, I just made this because I wanted to make it. It's like it doesn't need to be that deep sometimes. Like, and that's what happens with, I don't know, Demnophiles. I don't know what to call them.
I mean, Demna has literally said it himself. He said, no, like, a lot of these things, there is no me. Like, he said it in an interview. I can bring up the interview now. He said a lot of it doesn't actually have that much meaning. They're just ideas that I find interesting, and I want to create something about these ideas that come to my mind. So I don't know why people then go out of their way to be like, because when you think of consumerism and the commentary on consumerism and how he's talking about capitalism, and it's like, bro, it is a t-shirt with an internet logo on it.
No, he's talking about the way that our lives, they're molded by it's like, please, sit down, fam. It's an IQ.
I think everything can be contextualized, but I also think some people stay out of that conversation because they are not equipped. Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think you can, so there's a difference between contextualizing something for like a conversation about a wider socio-political thing that's going on. That's very different to giving credit to a designer for thinking about a certain thing. You know what I mean? So in the context of a fashion review, you can say, and this is part of a wider socio-political idea of so-and-so, but you can't say this designer was saying that. You know what I mean? Those are two completely different conversations that you are having. But I think a lot of what people do is they do the latter thing, where they say this designer is so, and they bring the designer's ideas into that political context that it actually wasn't in. So I think that's the bigger issue. It's so necessary. Like, you cannot just assume, like, no human being can just assume that everything they say is right, and, you know, every one of their ideas is sensational and that's it. That's where it ends. Which is why if you are full of, you know, you just have all these yes men around you, you're not going to create really good stuff because no one is really challenging you to be better. That's why I love these streams as a medium, because you can see the comments in real time. There's people that agree, there's people that disagree. I'm not living in a vacuum of my own world where no one else has an opinion and it's just mine and that's it. So I don't really understand this mentality that, you know, fashion should be in a vacuum and there's no critique of fashion that's valid, and, you know, let fashion just be fashion. And that's how you get terrible stuff that will end up in landfills and literally damage the planet.
Yeah, and I'm like, as I say to most creative people, I'm gonna stop coughing on the mic soon. I'll be real. But yeah, I know it ruins my audio experience afterwards, but I tell writers, listen, test your ideas in the public, like make tweets or make articles so that people can read them. I tell designers, listen, test your ideas in a forum where people like to talk about ideas that are being created. It doesn't always need to be this presentation, and like, it's not every single year you're gonna get an idea that is serendipitous and came to you from God, and now, you know, you can just give it to the world and it's just between you and God. Like, some ideas are made to be built along the way, and that is one of the reasons why we love process video so much, because when it's a really good idea, it's nice to see the process along the way.
Right.
And sometimes it's not a good idea and you can see the response and it doesn't really hit that much. So it's like, we should be able to create in safe spaces or places where we trust the critique of others, right? Because obviously, like, there is people who are really, really good at writing and like super high in the industry, but they like, who is this person on Twitter talking to me about something that, as if I didn't research it? It's like these people in your comments that say you don't know about Demna, but you've had Demna videos since like 2018 or where.
No, but that's because people online are a bit lazy and they don't like to do research. So I understand why people do that. I will literally say something about Demna on Twitter and people will be like, bro, you don't even understand Demna's work. And I'm like, bruh, I literally have probably 30 videos on YouTube analyzing.
And here's the reason why people need to go back to school these times. You literally just graduated from school. It's like, that's why ideas are like, yes, I understand, because I just wanted to note that, yeah, there's places where your ideas can be presented, but people can't understand the greater context because they haven't actually looked into the person that is saying it, which is why it's nice to have someone or people that value and understand the story that you've been telling for over a course of time. And that's why it's good to have forums for those type of things. But, you know, I understand why everybody's not trying to test their ideas out in public, because it's a little bit scary.
It's rough.
and people in the public don't care. But at the same time, it's like, we choose our friends for a reason, right? And if our friends are understanding, they understand our greater context, and we're able to present ideas without like fear of harsh judgment straight away, and we don't fear the probing and the questions, then we can create really solid ideas over a course of time.
This YouTube channel runs on your support. If you want to support the channel, you can subscribe to my Patreon. You'll gain access to exclusive content that includes everything from my Patreon podcast, where I give a behind the scenes insight into the fashion industry, as well as a fashion book club where I review my favorite fashion books. You can also check out my fashion ebook, which highlights the best fashion journalists to follow, definitions of common fashion terminology, and how to determine what a good source of fashion information is. The links to everything are in the description below.